Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Judges chapter 17, verse 1, through chapter 18, verse 31. There was a man named Micah from the Ephraimite hill country. He said to his mother, "You know the 1,100 pieces of silver which were stolen from you, about which I heard you pronounce a curse? Look, here, I have the silver. I stole it, but now I am giving it back to you." His mother said, "May the Lord reward you, my son." When he gave back to his mother the 1,100 pieces of silver, his mother said, "I solemnly dedicate this silver to the Lord. It will be for my son's benefit. We will use it to make a carved image and a metal image." When he gave the silver back to his mother, she took 200 pieces of silver to a silversmith, who made them into a carved image and a metal image. So she then put them in Micah's house. Now this man Micah owned a shrine. He made an ephod and some personal idols and hired one of his sons to serve as a priest. In those days, Israel had no king. Each man did what he considered to be right. There was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah. He was a Levite who had been temporarily residing among the tribe of Judah. This man left the town of Bethlehem in Judah to find another place to live. He came to the Ephraimite hill country and made his way to Micah's house. Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" He replied, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah. I am looking for a new place to live." Micah said to him, "Stay with me. Become my advisor and priest. I will give you 10 pieces of silver per year, plus clothes and food." So the Levite agreed to stay with the man. The young man was like a son to Micah. Micah paid the Levite. The young man became his priest and lived in Micah's house. Micah said, "Now I know God will make me rich, because I have this Levite as my priest." In those days, Israel had no king, and in those days the Danite tribe was looking for a place to settle, because at that time they did not yet have a place to call their own among the tribes of Israel. The Danites sent out from their whole tribe 5 representatives, capable men, from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and explore it. They said to them, "Go, explore the land." They came to the Ephraimite hill country, and spent the night at Micah's house. As they approached Micah's house, they recognized the accent of the young Levite. So they stopped there and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here?" He told them what Micah had done for him, saying, "He hired me, and I became his priest." They said to him, "Seek a divine oracle for us, so we can know if we will be successful on our mission." The priest said to them, "Go with confidence. The Lord will be with you on your mission." So the 5 men journeyed on and arrived in Laish. They noticed that the people there were living securely, like the Sidonians do, undisturbed and unsuspecting. No conqueror was troubling them in any way. They lived far from the Sidonians and had no dealing with anyone. When the Danites returned to their tribe in Zorah and Eshtaol, their kinsmen asked them, "How did it go?" They said, "Come on, let's attack them, for we saw their land and it is very good. You seem lethargic, but don't hesitate to invade and conquer the land. When you invade, you will encounter an unsuspecting people. The land is wide. God is handing it over to you, a place that lacks nothing on earth." So 600 Danites, fully armed, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. They went up and camped in Kiriath Jearim in Judah. To this day, that place is called Camp of Dan. It is west of Kiriath Jearim. From there, they traveled through the Ephraimite hill country and arrived at Micah's house. The 5 men who had gone to spy out the land of Laish said to their kinsmen, "Do you realize that inside these houses are an ephod, some personal idols, a carved image, and a metal image? Decide now what you want to do." They stopped there, went inside the young Levite's house, which belonged to Micah, and asked him how he was doing. Meanwhile, the 600 Danites, fully armed, stood at the entrance to the gate. The 5 men who had gone to spy out the land broke in and stole the carved image, the ephod, the personal idols, and the metal image, while the priest was standing at the entrance to the gate with the 600 fully armed men. When these men broke into Micah's house and stole the carved image, the ephod, the personal idols, and the metal image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They said to him, "Shut up, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us. You can be our advisor and priest. Wouldn't it be better to be a priest for a whole Israelite tribe than for just one man's family?" The priest was happy. He took the ephod, the personal idols, and the carved image, and joined the group. They turned and went on their way, but they walked behind the children, the cattle, and their possessions. After they had gone a good distance from Micah's house, Micah's neighbors gathered together and caught up with the Danites. When they called out to the Danites turned around and said to Micah, "Why have you gathered together?" He said, "You stole my gods that I made, as well as this priest, and then went away. What do I have left? How can you have the audacity to say to me, 'What do you want?'" The Danites said to him, "Don't say another word to us, or some very angry men will attack you, and you and your family will die." The Danites went on their way. When Micah realized they were too strong to resist, he turned around and went home. Now the Danites took what Micah had made, as well as his priest, and came to Laish, where the people were undisturbed and unsuspecting. They struck them down with a sword and burned the city. No one came to the rescue because the city was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. The city was in a valley near Beth Rehob. The Danites rebuilt the city and occupied it. They named it Dan after their ancestor, who was one of Israel's sons, but the city's name used to be Laish. The Danites worshipped the carved image. Jonathan, descendant of Gershom, son of Moses, and his descendants served as priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of the exile. They worshipped Micah's carved image the whole time God's authorized shrine was in Shiloh. It's interesting. This passage apparently is chronologically earlier than its place in the book, which, let's see, Matthew Henry had said, "All agree that what is related in this and the rest of the chapters to the end of this book was not done, as the narrative occurs, after Samson, but long before, even soon after the death of Joshua, in the days of Phinehas, the son of Eleazar. But it is cast here into the latter part of the book, that it might not interrupt the history of the judges, that it might appear how happy the nation was in the judges. It is here shown how unhappy they were when there was none." Yeah. So here you have a man named Micah from Ephraim, who had stolen 1,100 pieces of silver from his mother, but returns it. She, in turn, dedicates it to God, but rather than taking all of it, which she had dedicated to God, and giving it to God, she takes 200 of it, around a fifth, and creates a molten image and a carved image out of it. After that, this man named Micah has one of his sons serve as priest for him, but then he finds a wandering Levite who's looking for work and gives this position to this Levite instead, and thinks to himself, "Now I know God will make me rich because I have this Levite as my priest." So it's eminently clear that when this man does this, he has in mind material wealth. Though he might pay a little bit closer attention to the law and perhaps read the first line of the Ten Commandments of "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," nor shall you make a graven image for yourself, which he just violated here. And the Levite was supposed to not serve other gods. And it was through the sons of Aaron that you would have the priesthood be named, which this Levite was not. and 2, they were supposed to serve at the tabernacle rather than at this man's house. Though it was true that the Levites were meant to be scattered throughout Israel, with the purpose of bringing godliness, I suppose, to the whole of Israel. But this Levite falls short of that. And then you have the Danites here, who were looking for a place to settle. They send out spies, and they see this settlement that Micah has set up, and the Levite blesses them in their expedition. They find this group in Laish that is living securely and unperturbed by anyone. They head back to the Danite tribe and tell them, hey, these guys are going to be easy pickings. Let's go up and kill them. And so they do that, but on the way they stop and grab the carved images for themselves and the priest, the Levite. And he serves as their priest. And his family serves as their priests for the rest of their time until, I guess, the exile into Babylon, which is interesting. So you have this continual turning away from God in the Danite tribe there. And they seize this land for themselves. Let's see what Guzik has to say. This story gives us a picture of the internal condition of the people, and it's probable that they were added with that intention by the historian. Now there was a man, in Judges 17 to 18. It presents a detailed example of the spiritual confusion and sin in Israel during the days of the Judges. These 2 chapters show us just how bad things were. Whose name was Micah. Micah, from the tribe of Ephraim, stole 1,100 shekels of silver from his mother and then returned them. His mother blessed her son for returning the money, even though he had originally taken it. This account reveals a lot about the character of Micah, his mother, and the general spiritual state of Israel during this period. Judges 17:10 indicates that 10 shekels a year was an adequate wage. Therefore, 1,100 shekels was a great fortune. He gives the Levite 10 shekels a year to live on, and had stolen 1,100 from his mother. To make a carved image and a molten image. Some believe this was an image of a false god, such as Baal or Ashtoreth. Others believe that it was an image representing Yahweh. Either way, God strictly forbade such an image, whether it was meant to represent the true God or not. The gold calf that Aaron made was actually meant to represent Yahweh. But this violated the 2nd commandment. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. He made it into a carved image and a molded image. By his fallen nature, man wants to make God into his image. Many religious people carve their own concept of God and assume that this is the God of the Bible. It takes effort to understand and accept the God of the Bible. And when we want God to conform to our image of God, we're not actually conforming to God anymore. We're conforming to a God of our own imagination that we've made up ourselves. So it's a form of idolatry if we are submitting to this God that is the God of our imagination rather than the God of reality. The sense of this passage is that Micah did all this easily. It wasn't hard to have an idol made in Israel at that time. This shows how Israel's society was bent towards idolatry. It's not as though the blacksmith refused and was like, what are you having me do in Israel here? This was the people who, under Moses, In the law, it was said if somebody secretly entices you to come and serve other gods, then they were to be killed for this. Micah had a shrine. Micah first sets up a shrine, a sort of small temple, a place where others came to worship these idols, and made an ephod. Micah imitated the worship at the true tabernacle of God and made an ephod. This was a specific garment worn by priests of Israel. And household idols. In addition to this first idol, Micah also made household idols, literally teraphim, gods that were worshipped in hopes of gaining prosperity and guidance. Yeah. And the rites that we create in the worship of our God may seem very religious, may seem very spiritual, but unless we're worshiping the true God, again, we're worshiping something that we just made up. He consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest. Finally, Micah established an order of priesthood among his sons. In each of these, Micah did everything he could to set up a rival religion in Israel. All of this came from Micah, and not from God. This was a completely man-originated and man-centered religion. Therefore, the purpose of the shrine, the beautiful ephod, the attractive idols, and the established priesthood was to serve and please man, not God. This pattern of pleasing man, this pattern of man-pleasing religion continues to be common with many religions and churches today. Yeah, and it's a pattern that you can see throughout the Old Testament as well, where you have, I think it was either Solomon's son or the rival king, I can't remember which, who created his own religion, essentially, in the north and south parts of his territory, and set up his own priesthood for it, and set it up as a rival religion to the Judaism at the time. There was no king in Israel. There was, in fact, a king in Israel. Israel should have recognized the Lord God as their king, but since Israel rejected God as king, they were without any good and effective leadership. And everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This refers to the radical individualism that marked the time of the judges. People looked to self for their guide to morality and ethics. The people genuinely felt that they did what was right, but they measured it only by their own eyes. This is very much like the modern follow your heart, or let your heart be your guide thinking, or be true to yourself type things. Modern culture regards this as the ideal state of society. Yet the Bible and common sense tells us that this kind of moral, spiritual, and social anarchy brings nothing but destruction. It seemed right to the eyes of Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, but God said it was wrong. It seemed right to the eyes of the sons of Jacob to sell Joseph into slavery, but God said it was wrong. It seemed right to the eyes of Nadab and Abihu to offer strange fire before the Lord, but God said it was wrong. It seemed right to the eyes of King David to commit adultery with Bathsheba and cover it with murder, but God said it was wrong. It seemed right to the eyes of Judas to betray Jesus, but God said it was wrong. God's just such a spoil sport. He won't let us do what we want. No. God wants what's best for us, and when we choose for ourselves what's right and wrong, we see the consequences of that. Judges is a good proof text of that, in that as there was no king of Israel, everyone did what was right in their own eyes, and you can see the fallout that resulted from that, and the fallout from all those previous examples. There's a way that seems right to a man, but in its end is the way of death. When man follows his own instincts, apart from the redeemed nature of the converted person, it leads to ruin. We need to follow God's way, not our own. Yeah. There was a young man from Bethlehem. This man, as a Levite, had cities to live in and a place established by God for him to minister. Instead, he wanted to do what was right in his own eyes and went about offering himself as a priest for hire wherever he could find a place. Then he came to Ephraim, to the house of Micah. This explains how this particular Levite and the previously mentioned Micah crossed paths. "Dwell with me, and be a father and a priest to me." Micah wanted this Levite to stay with him and work as a priest for him. He did this because he wanted to legitimize his personal shrine by having an officially recognized priest serving there. Deep down, he knew that his idolatry was false and meaningless, and he hoped that this would make it legitimate. "Men crave for a priest. Be my priest. Say for me to God what I cannot say. The sacrifices offered by thy hands are more likely to avail with him than those rendered by mine." From Mayor. "I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your sustenance." So for 10 shekels and a suit of clothes, the Levite hired himself out to the idolatry of Micah. The Levite was a perfect example of a hireling, someone who served God, more an idol, for what it could give him, instead of serving to glorify the Lord. There are many different ways that hirelings get what they want. The monetary hireling is obvious, but there are also emotional hirelings who get into the ministry because of their insecurities and their need for approval. Then the Levite was content to dwell with Micah. The arrangement seemed perfect to everyone, and Micah felt he had gained a son. Which I think should be a warning to us. When everything appears to be going well, everything seemed to be going Micah's way. He was prosperous enough to build all of this. Everything he had set up was in order. His new religion was bustling, and it seemed good to him. But what seems good to us in the short term doesn't necessarily result in our long-term well-being. Micah was attempting to maintain his relationship with God by violating the commandments of God. The Levite degenerated into an attempt to secure his own material comfort by compromise. From Morgan. So Micah consecrated the Levite. Micah's consecration meant nothing at all. He had no authority from God to declare a renegade Levite as set apart, consecrated by God to the service of this idolatrous shrine. The only one who can consecrate or set someone in a position of authority like that is one who has the authority to do so himself. I can't go out and say, you are now an employee of this business here, if I have no position at that business. Likewise, Micah has no standing here before God to offer this position as priest. Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as priest. Micah's confidence was just as false as his consecration was. They were both based on superstition, not God's word. We can say Micah was utterly sincere, but totally wrong. Sincerity is nice, but gets you nowhere if it is not coupled with truth. A person who sincerely thinks they can swim across the Pacific Ocean will drown just as surely as the person who isn't as sincere. Micah wanted his religion to have an air of legitimacy to it, and so he stole pieces from what God had given to men. But that did not grant it an ounce more legitimacy, but rather heaped judgment on himself because of all of the laws that he was breaking and doing everything that he did. For until that day, their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. This is the tribe of Dan. They had land apportioned to them, but they found their own land too hard to conquer. Judges 17 was the story of compromise and self-willed carnality in the lives of a few individuals. Judges 18 shows how these individual sins made entire tribes wicked and rebellious against God. So they went to the mountains of Ephraim. Looking for easier land to conquer and make their own, the Danites came to the land of the tribe of Ephraim and the house of Micah. And this Levite in training, who was in training for wickedness. They recognized the voice of the young Levite. It may be that the spies from the tribe of Dan knew the renegade Levite personally. It is also possible that they simply recognized his accent as being from the southern part of Judah. Please inquire of God, that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous. This shows what a spiritually confused time this was in Israel. These Danites, on a sinful mission, met with a sinful Levite and wanted to know from a righteous God if their mission would be successful. Then the sinful Levite sent the sinning men on their way with God's blessing. It's interesting, too. They sent out these spies to go into, well, they rejected the land of their inheritance, but chose a follow-up place similar to the 12 spies that had been dispersed throughout the land of Canaan prior to the Israelites coming into it. They should have taken a note from their history and seen that when God was for them, no one could stand against them, and should have taken the land of their possession. They dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians, this tribe in Laish. The Danites found a city nearby that was not occupied by Israelites, but a colony of the Sidonians. This was a group that God told Israel to drive out of the land of Canaan. In his sermon titled The Danger of Carnal Security, Charles Spurgeon used the description of the Sidonians in Judges 18, verse 7 and 27 and 28, as a description of the false security of the carnal behavior. They are like the Sidonians, free from all internal struggles or conflicts, free from rulers such as the governor of conscience, free from ties and concerns to other people, free from the fear of invasion. For we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Seeing that the land was good, and the city was not heavily defended, the Danites believed this would be a good city to conquer and take as their own territory. 600 men, armed with weapons of war. Curiously, they assembled an army of 600 men to fight for the city of Laish in the land of the tribe of Ephraim, yet they could not fight for the land of their own tribal allotment. For some reason, to them, and often to us, a distant battle seemed easier than a close battle. Entering there, they took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. This was a strange combination of low morality and strong religious feeling. It was as if someone really wanted to study the Bible, therefore they stole several Bibles. There are many examples in history of people satisfying a religious impulse in a completely immoral way. In Europe, in the 14th century, unemployed soldiers often became small armies of bandits and robbed and burned and killed and raped towns and villages all over Europe. These brutal criminals often negotiated with the town before attacking it. If the town agreed to give the brutes a large amount of money, the army left the city alone. If the town refused to give the money or could not give the money, they attacked. These were done with formal negotiations and contracts. They have discovered that when these horrible men came to a monastery, they insisted on money as well. But they also demanded that the priest of the monastery give them a written document saying all their sins were forgiven. They took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. They used violence and theft to supposedly advance a religious cause, and the priest allowed them by standing aside as they did so. During the Los Angeles riots in the 1990s, a reporter came across 3 looters leaving a store. He asked them what they took, and the first two told him off with profanity, but the third man said, "I got some gospel music. I love Jesus." Put your hand over your mouth. This was a threat. They commanded the Levite to stop objecting or be attacked. So the priest's heart was glad. His heart was glad because he was filled with mercenary ambition. The Levite did not care about Micah, only for the pay and status that he might get by being the priest for a whole tribe instead of a mere family. And Micah came out and said, "You have taken away my gods, which I made." This is a powerful irony. Micah had to rescue his own gods. Obviously, his gods should be able to care for themselves, being gods, after all. We wonder if Micah saw the foolishness of this. Probably not if he's running out in front of a armed band of mercenaries to rescue his gods. We each either worship a god of our own making, or we worship the true God who made us. but the gods we make are always less than we are. Idol worship is just another way of worshiping self. And the priest. Micah was foolish enough to have a priest who could be taken away, and it reminds us of how wonderful it is to have a high priest who cannot change, and who can never be taken away from us. As F.B. Meyer wrote, "Whatever can be taken from us has the mark and signature of man upon it. Yet Jesus Christ, our high priest, can never change, will never leave us out of a concern for someone else, and our sins and failures cannot rob us of him." Amen. Now, what more do I have? This shows how empty Micah's idolatry was. His false gods didn't bring him any lasting good. Yeah. It's interesting. Micah created these gods and these religious rituals with an aim of material security and possession. That is, he had hoped in making them that they would make him things. In the time that he had them, where then is his profit? Because at the seizing of these things, the carved image and the molded image and the priest, he says that you've left me with nothing. Where then is all the profit that he was supposed to be making with these idols and this false religion that he had made? He, by his own mouth, testifies that he has nothing after they've been taken from him. "Lest angry men fall upon you and you lose your life." This event and these words illustrate the general lawlessness in Israel during this long period of the Judges. The children of Dan stole Micah's idol simply under the principle of might makes right. Yeah, and this from fellow Israelites as well. They were from the tribe of Dan, Micah was from the tribe of Ephraim, but this won them no fealty to brotherhood here. When Micah saw that they were too strong for him, they were too strong for both Micah and his gods. One should never have a god that needs protection. To Laish, a people quiet and secure, there was no deliverer. This is written in a way meant to make us at least a little sympathetic for the people of Laish. The people of Israel were instructed to take the land of the Canaanites, but this seemed like an unprincipled attack from wicked men of the tribe of Dan. And they called the name of the city Dan. The city of Dan will become the most prominent northern city in Israel. The phrase, "from Dan to Beersheba," will become an expression meaning from the north to the south of Israel, indicating all of Israel. And this being a hub of idolatry, now that Micah's priest here has set up his evil shop. The children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image. This was the beginning of established idolatry in Israel, in the Promised Land. There was individual idolatry in Israel long before this, but this is official idolatry. Through a strange chain of events, this began with a son stealing 1,100 shekels from his mother. It ended with an entire tribe of Israel led into established idolatry. Yeah. It's interesting to think if he had never stolen that money, what effect would that have had upon the whole of the nation? And I think, too, it should get us to think more seriously about our personal sins. How we think when we sin that it's merely against ourselves and that what we do only affects ourselves. But it really affects all of us. Yeah. So they set up for themselves Micah's carved image. We can suppose that Micah had no idea how far-reaching the effects of his sin would become. His personal idolatry became the idolatry of an entire tribe, setting up a rival center of worship to the house of God in Shiloh. Whether intentionally, on the part of the writer, or no, there's a touch of satire in this declaration. There, at Shiloh, was the true center of the national life, the house of God. Nevertheless, at Dan they gathered about the false, and rendered a worship which was destructive. Yeah. Looking at Matthew Henry here for a little bit. Idolatry was immediately set up there. God had graciously performed his promise in putting them in possession of that which fell to their lot, obliging them thereby to be faithful to him, who had been so to them. But the first thing they do after they are settled in is to break his statutes. As soon as they begin to settle themselves, they set up the graven image, perversely attributing their success to that idol, which, if God had not been infinitely patient, would have been their ruin. Thus, a prosperous idolater goes on to offend, imputing this, his power, unto his God. That is, attributing falsely that it was their idol that did this for them. Their Levite, who officiated as priest, is at length named here, Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. The word Manasseh in the original has the letter N set over the head, which some of the Jewish rabbi say is an imitation that it should be left out. And then Manasseh will be Moses. And this Levite, they say, was grandson to the famous Moses, who indeed had a son named Gershom, but say they, the historian in honor of Moses, by a half interposition of that letter, turned the name into Manasseh. Interesting. That the posterity of this Jonathan continued to act as priest to this family of Dan that was seated at Laish and in the country about till the captivity. After Micah's image was removed, this family retained the character of priests and had respect paid them as such by that city, and it is very probable that Jeroboam had an eye to them when he set up one of his calves there, which they could welcome at Cain and put some reputation upon, when the priests of the Lord would have nothing to do with them, and that this family officiated as some of his priests. Yeah. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.